Hello, everyone. This is Sadhana Alangar, HL7's Director of Education. Welcome to this first of 3 co-chair training webinars, Leading Through Facilitation. Abdul Malik Shakir is here to lead us through this discussion. He's joining us from his RV, and he's going to tell us all about what he is doing now and what his leadership roles were at HL7. And then talk more about leading through facilitation. Abdul Malik, over to you.
Thank you, Sanja. One little viewpoint on that is I'm actually joining you from my home. My home just happens to be on wheels. We don't call it an RV. It's our motorhome. Right now we are in Joshua Tree. Okay, but be that as it is. This class is on leading through facilitation. Each of you have been elected to the co-chair position, and I'm going to, in this course, try to convince you that you are a facilitator, and that facilitation is one of the main jobs of a co-chair. I'm Abdul Malik Shakir. I saw the roster of people attending. I think I know most of you. I've been with HL7 since 1991 and have had the honor of chairing modeling methodology, public health. I've been active in many other work groups. Now I'm just a full-time traveler and an HL7 evangelist. But I've been in healthcare for more than 45 years, and 40 plus of those have been in healthcare. There was a 5-year stint when I worked in insurance. But HL7 is what I do, and health informatics is what I do, primarily focused on overcoming the obstacles for effective health information integration by using standards. So that's me. The course that we're going through today, my introductions, learning objectives, and then we'll talk about the facilitator role and compare and contrast that role to the work group co-chair. And then we'll get into the meat of becoming an effective facilitator. And we'll talk about the dynamics of group decision-making and the art of facilitative listening. And then the major issue is, how do you deal with difficult dynamics that will occur as you're presiding over a meeting? And then the goal here is to build sustainable agreements. And so we'll talk about the principles of that. And in the retrospective, we'll go back and visit all of this. The learning objectives is that by the end of this class, you will have learned those skills that are necessary to be an effective workgroup facilitator. Recognizing that the role of the facilitator is to encourage full participation from the group and promote mutual understanding and foster participatory decision-making. HL7, as a standards development organization, its major strength is its people. And what gives our standards, that makes them most effective, is how we are able to collaborate among each other and bring our diverse opinions together. And that's why our standards are so well implemented. We have more than 40 countries involved. And so we have people who come from various different cultures and backgrounds. Not everyone in HL7 has a technical background. Some more are subject matter experts. They may be even care deliverers. Some of them are data users. And so with that diverse community, we want to get all of those perspectives together so we can come up with the best product. And it's the role of the facilitator or the co-chair in this particular case to make that happen. So that's your job, right? There are other roles within HL7 than co-chair that are also called facilitators. So I'll talk about those roles. There's the modeling facilitator, vocabulary facilitator, etc. And get into the dynamic of group decision-making, facilitative listening, dynamic discussions, and building sustained agreements. So modeling facilitators was the first idea of facilitators that came out. It was actually introduced when we went to HL7 version 3. In version 3, the primary methodology was to begin your design of your specification by using the reference information model and constraining it into that set of data that were necessary for the scenarios that were part of the exchange you were working on. That idea of using models as a first step to developing specification was new in version 3. And so we established a group of modeling facilitators to help those who might not had experience with modeling to learn how to do it and to do it well. And so the idea was that the modeling facilitators would help facilitate the modeling happening within work groups. After that became established and our means of introducing a new skill into our methodology, other needs for other methodology facilitators came in. Publishing facilitators. The idea of how we publish our standards has changed enormously. I joined HL7 back in 1991, and at that time, I was going to say we had Word, but I don't even know if it was Word. It certainly was a document. And now we have HTML and how you do publishing of the FHIR standard, and even the V2 standard is now going to be web-based and navigable. So the art of publishing is not a skill everyone has. And so there's the idea of having publishing facilitators that will work with work groups to allow them to apply the skills necessary to publish our specifications, assuming that skill is not widely distributed. Vocabulary facilitators. One of the, I guess, holy grails of healthcare interoperability is to have semantic interoperability. And in order for that to happen, one has to understand the concept of code systems, code system terms, and value sets, et cetera. That is also not a skill that is in wide circulation. So we have vocabulary facilitators who assist with the management of the terminologies involved with our specifications. And again, they are a skilled worker who's bringing a capability and either mentoring others in following it out or perhaps taking on the task themselves. But that's the vocabulary facilitator. And then there are project facilitators. These are the people who, for a particular project, will help mentor that project through its steps to completion, from project scope statement through project conception, through publication, and all the way through balloting, et cetera. The project facilitators work under the germane of a work group and tend to be the primary persons with whom the co-chairs have relationships with, because the co-chair is responsible for the work of that work group and accomplishes that work by facilitating the project facilitators in doing their job. There are other facilitators. There are conformance facilitators. I think even we may even have facilitators for how to stand up a implementation guide. So the idea is that these facilitators are what I refer to as knowledge workers or skill workers. When you create a project scope statement and you have a project, these facilitators become a member of your team. And they are named. Sometimes they are a member of your work group. Sometimes they're a member of some other work group. It used to, once upon a time, modeling methodology used to lend out people who they referred to as modeling facilitators, or a vocabulary would lend out people who they thought of as vocabulary facilitators. But these persons would work on the project as a team member, although they may not be full-time within the work group. And these facilitators would determine how it was they would be interacting with the rest of the project team as to whether they are answering questions or teaching or actually doing the work or mentoring and guiding. So that was the role of that facilitator. Right. So there are many definitions for the term facilitators. One way is to think of this as an individual who enable a group or organization to work more effectively. Another one is one who contributes structure and process to interaction so groups will be able to function effectively. For this class, we're going to be using this definition of facilitator. Your job is to support everyone to do their best thinking in practice. You do this by encouraging full participation, promoting mutual understanding, and cultivating shared responsibility. It's through that cultivating of shared responsibility that our standards become sustainable over time. During the course of developing the specification, there will most certainly be disagreements. Everything that we do, there's at least 3 ways to do it. Sometimes there could be as many as a dozen different ways. Coming to consensus over which of the many ways has the least consequences and has the best benefits and therefore is the best choice is fraught with disagreement as we arrive at that decision. And so, but if we do build consensus and cultivate shared responsibility, we minimize the need to go ahead and revisit that decision. So that's a very important part of the facilitation, is cultivating that shared responsibility. So the thoughts that I'm sharing with you today are not mine alone. I have certainly bought into them. I have bought into them, but they are documented in a book called The Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making. And I would, if you're really into facilitation, it's a role that you not only do this at HL7. I mean, if you have children, or if you go to any planning, my mother-in-law is turning 100 in July, and the whole family is now planning her birthday celebration. So that needs a facilitator. Lots of moving pieces there. So there are many aspects in your life where facilitation is necessary, and I think the things you'll learn in this class will be useful for those as well. The instruction guide for being a work group co-chair is documented in the co-chair handbook. And I believe one of these 3 classes goes over the content of that. That has gone through many iterations. The one I have in this particular slide deck was dated September 2009. Anyone who has been in HL7 since 2009 knows that over the last decade, we have had lots of changes in how we do things. Almost everything's in JIRA now. Confluence was introduced maybe 5 years ago. And so the how you do co-chair is documented in the co-chair handbook. The what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve is trying to be covered in this tutorial. Right. So this class has talked about facilitator and facilitating, and I want to compare and contrast what it is to be a facilitator as what it is to be a co-chair, where as a facilitator, you are selected by or assigned to a project. Right. So if you are a modeling facilitator, you could, as a project comes to your work group, put up your hand and say, yeah, I'd like to be the modeling facilitator. And that project facilitator would then select you to be a member of their team in the role of facilitating the modeling aspect of that project. You might be assigned to the project either by a co-chair or perhaps by one of the other work groups from which you are borrowing a resource. So a vocabulary might assign a facilitator to work with your group, or modeling might assign someone. While the co-chair position is not something that you're selected by or assigned to a project, you are elected by or appointed to a work group. Right? So you're not responsible for a project. You're responsible for the work of that entire work group. The majority of our work group co-chairs are elected. There are some who, by virtue of the position that they in, become the member of an oversight group, but many are appointed. So they're either appointed by the technical steering committee, or they might be appointed by the board, depending on which work group we're talking about. But in either way, you're not selected or assigned to a project, you're elected. So you have to actually put your name on a ballot and be voted by the group that you'll be overseeing. Right? The facilitator is a liaison. As a project liaison, you might be a liaison to one or more of the technical work groups. Co-chair, you're the work group representative and liaison to the work groups, in this case, steering committee. I should update this slide. We no longer have steering committees, but you are a representative of your work group, so that when we have TSC meetings, you are speaking on behalf of your work group. Be clear that you're not speaking on your behalf, but you're representing the interests of your work group. Whether you agreed with what your work group did or not is not germane. You're representing the work group. In a facilitator, you're a knowledge worker, and you have a particular technical or skill that in which you are an expert. And as a co-chair, you're not a knowledge worker. You're a leader. You're the individual who remains accountable for the work of the work group, but it is not necessary that you be skilled in all aspects of what's necessary to accomplish that work. All right, so you as a co-chair, typically in order to get elected as co-chair, the work group tends to elect those who are subject matter experts in the work of the work group. However, that is not nothing on the ballot says you have to be. Sometimes simply having someone who's a good communicator, someone who is ethical, someone who's a good listener might be the skills that the work group is looking for, and recognizing that the work group itself has a sufficient membership to take care of the subject matter. So is not you as co-chair who has to be expert in your domain. You have members of your work group who carry that expertise. But as a facilitator, you're expected to be a knowledge worker, skilled in that particular. So if you're a modeling facilitator, you're expected to be well versed on modeling. And the same thing with publishing. If you're publishing for that, you're supposed to know the ins and outs and vocabulary as well for vocabulary facilitators. A facilitator is a member of the project team, and it either works as a contributor or an enabler on that project team. Co-chair is not a member of the team. They are the sponsor and provide the first line administrative oversight. So the project reports to the work group, and it's the co-chair that makes that happen. And so that they are a sponsor of the project by virtue of being the presiding officer over that work group, who's listed as the sponsor for that project. Both the facilitator and co-chair encourages full participation, promotes mutual understanding, and cultivates shared responsibility. This is a responsibility that is shared between a facilitator and a co-chair, and is the focus of this tutorial. Right, and so I'm talking about facilitation and facilitators. I know that my audience is co-chairs, and so I thought up front it would be useful to acknowledge that I recognize the difference in those two terms, but the common feature is that this idea of encouraging full participation, promoting mutual understanding, and cultivating shared responsibility. Sadhna, I see that there are 4 comments in chat. I don't know if there are questions or simply chat that's going on.
The questions about whether recording and slide decks will be shared, and also the most recent co-chair handbook from the Confluence page. Marty has posted the link to that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so skills. Skills, I'm hoping that I will communicate well enough for you to be able to actually exercise these skills at the end of this class. The first being being able to manage the dynamics of group decision making, to be able to practice facilitative listening skills, deal with difficult dynamics that will occur, and then build principles for sustainable agreements. And we'll take each of these in turn. The first is to understand the dynamics of group decision making. When a decision needs to be made, for this ballot comment, is this a persuasive or non-persuasive, and is it persuasive with mod? What change should be made if it is persuasive? Those are decisions that we make every time we go through a ballot cycle. So a new topic hits the table, and someone says that, should immunization and medication be separate resources, or should they be combined into one? Right, new topic, right? And then what happens is the discussion begins around that topic, and you get a lot of familiar opinions. People will say these, oh no, they have to be separate. We tried that in the RIM and it didn't work out, or no, they're administered by different people. So people will indicate their familiar reasons why they either are for or against the idea of merging those two resources into one. All right. And then from those familiar, you'll begin to get diverse perspectives. It really, they'll surface because people will first voice their opinions. And in those opinions, when you ask why they have those opinions, it's really because they have diverse perspective. Some of them are from vendors who will be, who recognize the technical infrastructure that would be impacted by that. Some of them might work in actually administering vaccines, and so they know that that's different than the pharmacy dispensing medications. And so, because of those perspectives, is the reasons why they have diverging thinking about the topic, right? And then the next part of decision making is to come up with inclusive alternatives. Say, well, what if we kept them separate, but make sure the two work groups work with each other to keep where they have common things in sync? So you begin looking for compromise, and then you begin to synthesize and refine the compromises that you may have come to. Eventually, we get to convergent thinking, and we get to the point where we all agree on this final outcome on this new topic. But that's the pathway, and it takes time. And work group meetings usually done over conference calls, typically an hour in length, and often have 6 or 7 decisions that need to be made during the course of that meeting. And so there's a finite amount of time to move it from the topic being introduced to a convergent thinking. And so the goal of facilitation is to help make sure that that's done well and makes good use of the time. Time is going to become an issue when you enter the groan zone. The groan zone is inevitable. You will, at anytime a new topic is introduced and you start with this divergent thinking, there will come a point where that divergent thinking has reached its peak, and you will need to then begin trying to herd the cats back into convergent thinking. And that difference between divergent thinking and transitioning into convergent thinking is referred to as the groan zone. And some of the things that you'll discover there are, I'll call them personality traits of the persons participating in this decision making. One of the ones that I personally have tried to overcome is this idea of self-censorship. In a work group, you will find that there are some persons who will not speak up. They won't voice their opinion. Sometimes they're just simply misinformed. I know I've been in meetings where people say that they're not a member. Well, at our working group meetings, anybody's able to contribute to the conversation. You don't have to be a member of HL7 to do so. Or self-censorship might be that, well, gee, this is my first meeting. Right. So people have reasons why but some people are shy and simply don't want to speak up in a public group where they are fear being judged. But one of the things you do, in order for us to have the best decisions made, we have to have all of the perspectives on the table. So your job as a co-chair is to encourage people to feel that, to recognize that this is a safe environment and that self-censorship is detrimental to our objectives. The other thing is sort of akin to self-censorship is reliance on authority. You'll have people who won't speak up or won't defend their position because they yield to someone else. And a general tendency among some cultures is to yield to the leader. And so we do have to recognize that in some cultures, questioning the leader is taboo. And so when a co-chair has an opinion and it differs from the working group member, they might self-censor themselves. And so you as a co-chair have to be very careful about voicing your opinion. And in fact, it would be best if you kept your opinion to yourself, and unless and until there's a vote taken and it's tied and you have to cast the deciding vote. Because when a co-chair speaks, it carries weight for some people and it can really hinder the discussion. If you want to be heard and everything, you might want to shift the presiding co-chair to someone else so that you can actually participate in the discussion. But reliance on authority, one of the biggest things is people yielding to the co-chair. People will also yield to what they think of as an authority. You know, I'm definitely an IT person, been in IT for 45 years or so. I'm in a room with a surgeon, and we're talking about installing catheters in heart surgery. Well, I'm going to yield to that person as an authority, but the idea is to make sure that you're yielding because that person is has persuaded you or has convinced you of the reality, not simply because of the role or title they may have. Everyone in a working group meeting is a working group member. You leave your job title on it. Your opinions have to be made persuasive in order to prevail. It's not, you cannot do it simply based off of your title. Okay. The next thing is taking fixed positions. There will be, during the course of the discussion, someone who's just refusing to yield. They'll say, this is the way it's done. This is the way it's always been done, or they may have their fixed position, and sometimes it's done out of self-serving, in which case they have they may be negatively affected if the decision doesn't go their way. But the person who you're communicating with, and you're giving them, trying to understand their position and giving them reasons why they may want to come to consensus on a compromise, can be difficult. And if someone is taking fixed positions and is unwilling to or to yield. And then the last thing is this idea of thinking of win-lose mentality. And it's that win-lose mentality that often causes people to take those fixed positions, that they want to win the argument as opposed to losing the argument. When the idea really is to come to consensus. There's no one win and live. We win as a group when we come to a shared position on the decision we've made. All voices have been heard, perspectives have been taken, and the group has come to a decision. The individual does not win or lose the argument. It's the group came to a decision through the course of discussion. You need to combat those who have a win-lose mentality and are unwilling to yield or compromise because they think that in doing so they lose. Equally harmful is the one who thinks that by winning the argument, by having their idea prevail, that they've won, and they may chase winning so high that they don't really care that evidence came in that the decision wasn't a good one. They simply want to win, and that would be bad for the group. There are other dynamics. I think if you get the book, I think they identify like 12 different dynamics that come up during this groan zone. I focused on these 4 because these are the ones I see bubbling up in working group meetings that I've been a participant in. All right. This is again called the groan zone, and we are about to learn the skills necessary to overcome these dynamics. Right. And this is as we're moving from a competing frame of reference to a shared framework of understanding, we will go through this groan zone. Right. So I just described these and the what does it mean to overcome self-censorship, encouraging full participation, building respect, making people know that it is a safe atmosphere in which to share the position. Overcoming fixed position by promoting mutual understanding. But make sure that fixed position is because of misunderstanding. So try to get misunderstandings cleared up, surface first, and then clear them, and treat everyone respectful, stay impartial, honor all viewpoints, and keep listening. Overcoming the win-lose mentality, foster inclusiveness, and then overcoming reliance on authority is cultivating that shared responsibility by inspiring people to recognize that everyone comes with perspective and everyone's perspective is important. That is what makes our product the best in the world, is that collaborative. I think Graham has often said that about FIRE, that FIRE is a great product, but he always gives the credit to the FIRE community. And I think the use of Zulip as a way of allowing the community to speak and to talk is what's making FIRE great. So Graham is often referred to as the father of FIRE, and he always resists that crown and says the father of FIRE is the community. And Graham is a great facilitator. Okay, facilitative listening skills. The idea here is to have an accessible communication style, so that you're taking more seriously by more people. Right. The ideas that are presented poorly are harder for people to hear. So you want to listen to whoever has the floor and is trying to make that point, and try to look for things like someone being repetitious. Someone who continues to make the point that like I said, we're discussing whether or not to combine the immunization resource with the medication resource, and someone keeps making the point that the value sets associated with the medication are different, and they make that point over and over and over again. And one of the things you as a facilitator do is help the person summarize their thinking and by maybe paraphrasing back to them what it is the point they're making. And then someone may be exaggerating or distorting the truth. What you want to do there is not necessarily call them out as fabricators, but to validate the central point that they're making. So someone would say that if we were to combine these, a person might be prescribed an immunization. Well, okay, there are controls in place. So you may want to say, I understand you're worried about the implementation implications, not the standard implications. So that the discussion stays on that and not the exaggerating or distorting comment. People go off on tangents, and someone may say that, oh, gee, if we combine immunizations with medications, we may as well combine conditions with observations. Yeah, well, yeah, okay, I can see the analogy you're drawing here, but that's not our topic. Our topic is, what are we going to do about this thing that's actually on the table? So try to keep people from bringing in tangents. You have to listen for it to recognize that they may be using it simply as an analogy or a metaphor, but you want to make sure we don't go down the path of chasing that rabbit and stay central on the topic that's on the table. You will also find that someone speaking in awkward, broken sentences. This sometimes comes from the fact that the person may be nervous, but also we are such a diverse organization that we often have members in our work group for whom English is not their primary spoken way of communicating. And so in those cases, they may be uncomfortable expressing themselves in English. And so you need to listen for that and maybe help them make their point by listening to what they're trying to articulate and asking them non-directive questions so that they can respond. This is, depending on where we are meeting in the world, and so we will get different expertise in English. We always conduct our work in English. That's not the primary language for everyone. So you as a facilitator should listen for that and help that person communicate to the group. Don't put words in their mouth. Try to understand what it is they're trying to say and express it for them, but don't add your piece to it or but more than what they were trying to communicate. Dealing with difficult dynamics. So these things are going to happen. Some of these features, you'll even be able to identify the person who routinely does this. If you've been chairing for any length of time, there will be someone in your group who repeats ideas that have already been expressed. Quibbles over minor details. Should that be a comma or a semicolon? Continually rises to a pet issue no matter what the topic's being discussed. So you might be discussing whether or not we're going to go for break, and they say, yeah, and we shouldn't combine immunizations and medications. Oh, well, gee, we finished talking about that. Why do you keep bringing that point up? Argue as a way of clarifying an idea. So they're really not trying to argue against a principle that's on the table. They're simply trying to be clear, but they're expressing it as if it's in an argumentative form. Blame other people's without acknowledging his own part, nitpicks, whispers during the meeting while someone else is talking. You need to be aware of these dynamics that are happening with the group and be prepared to interject, especially if someone else is whispering while someone else is talking. You can actually ask them to take the conversation outside or cease it, or at least bring to their attention we're having difficulty listening to the person who has the floor while you're engaged in that conversation. Right. So keep an eye out for these behaviors that are coming from individuals who are participating in the discussion, and be prepared to take action to overcome them. In order to deal with the dynamics, the actions that need to be taken are, first, establish supportive group norms, right? And typically among those is the idea that one person speaks at a time and we speak in turn. Sometimes we will put on a flip chart or on a whiteboard, as people raise their hands, we put them on the list so that they know that their turn is coming. We also establish group norms such as no cross-talking, no derogatory language, those sort of things, stay on topic. So establish those up front. Also, during the course of the meeting, especially where we are recognizing in the work group that there are first-time attendees, we might want to make them clear that of how we work as a work group and how discussions are held, and to let them know that even if you're not an HL7 member, you're allowed to speak. And if your group has certain norms about who's allowed to vote, there's some groups where only members of the group actually have their votes count. Others are allowed to participate in the discussion, but when it comes to voting, they can't. So make sure that the participants in the discussion are aware of the group norms. They're established on our decision-making practices page, but most people don't read those in advance of coming to the meeting. The other thing is when the discussion gets hot, rather than letting it go on, you put the brakes on and just step out of the process and say, the way that we are handling this is that we are going to go for discussion another 5 minutes, and then we're going to put it to vote. Or you might want to talk about the process and such as this is something that we're going to take offline. So you're no longer discussing the content of what's being described, but talking about the process by which we're going to come to consensus. One of those processes might be to break into small groups. So you might say, well, gee, we have 30 people in this group, and I'm hearing discussion from 5 or 6 of you. Why don't I ask that you form a subgroup and maybe come back after the break with something so we can further the discussion. So breaking into small groups, sometimes, especially if you have a worker who has 7 topics on the agenda and 30 people in the room, and not everybody has the same passion for all the agenda topics. You might want to take those who are more passionate about a topic for which we're having difficulty reaching consensus and ask them to meet independently from the larger group, and then come back after some period, say after the break, or maybe during our next conference call, or and then come back and continue the discussion with the larger group, with having already built consensus with that smaller group. That's engaging in a period of suspended judgment. Well, let's take a break. The other thing you can do is switch to a structured go around. We used to do this during what we called the facilitator roundtable, where we would go around the room and get everyone's opinion or voice on a particular topic. And that's a good way to overcome those persons who might be self-censoring or yielding to authority. You're able to, by going round robin, first of all, reinforce the idea that everyone's opinions count, and you also can bring information out and perspectives from those who might not have been participating. The other thing to do is acknowledge outside distractions. Before I started this class, I thought about that, and I closed all my windows and shut the door to make sure that the noise from the outside did not come into this. I'm now regretting that because it's beginning to warm up in here. It's 70-something degrees here, so it's starting to warm up. But acknowledging outside, there's noise coming in if people are talking. If sometimes we're holding meeting during lunch and lunch is being served, those kinds of distractions have to be acknowledged and say, okay, well, let's wait until they finish serving before we resume this conversation. Or would somebody please close that door? If the projector's making a noise, let's see, we'll turn that off for a minute just so we can all hear, or get a microphone. So recognize that there are possible distractions that are affecting the ability to communicate well within the group. Again, you're not in here doing any opinions, but you're fostering, making sure that the distractions are not taking away from the discussion. Encourage more people to participate. You may even call on them by name. John, what do you think about that? Craig, I know you work in that area. Why don't you tell us what your experience has been? So you might ask for particular perspectives or insight, especially if you're familiar with some of the parties and might have a clue as to what perspective they would bring to the table, and you haven't heard that perspective voiced yet. So you might want to encourage them to participate by drawing it out. And then, of course, educate members about group dynamics. Let them know that, for those of you who might be first-time attendees, this don't think that we're arguing here. This is the process. This is the process of sausage making. This is how standards are made. There are disagreements, but through respectful dialogue, we will come to consensus. We can and always have. Right? So in order to get that decision to be sustainable, you must understand the dynamics of group decision making. And so hopefully I've conveyed to you the idea that anytime a new topic is introduced to a group who then needs to make a decision, that topic will first be met with divergent thinking. And then your job as a facilitator is to help move from that convergent thinking to convergent thinking to the point that we come to consensus. And that's true for every decision made by a group. And to recognize in that transition period where we're going from sharing our various perspectives that may seem to be incompatible to a consensus feeling that in between there is the grown zone, and you need to be the facilitator who listens for those grown activities and watches for those behaviors and encourage full participation. You must make sure you promote mutual understanding. So if anything's been unclear, make it maybe voice it in another language. So somebody may say that can't be done. And you say, well, and actually the rules don't prevent that from being done. I understand how you might say there's negative consequences, but it's not that it can't be done. It's just the answer is should not be done. Foster inclusive decisions where we get away from the either or. The world is not binary. There's always some gray area in which we can come to a consensus. And then cultivating a shared responsibility. And this is, in the time that I've been at HL7, I think I've seen great growth here in the concept of shared responsibility. When I first joined in 91, we used to think of the work groups as being the work of an individual. We sometimes refer to observations as Wayne Tracy's work group as opposed to observations work group. But you as a co-chair are accountable for the work of your work group. It is you as a co-chair who the TSC will reach out to when your projects get late and or your work group is not meeting the work group health. So you as a co-chair are accountable. The responsibility for the work of the work group is a shared responsibility, with you providing oversight in the work group. And so you need to make sure that the entire work group feels that the buy-in and responsibility for the work products produced by that work group. You must have and exercise patience, perseverance, and tolerance. Do recognize that HL7 is a multicultural organization. We have all perspectives coming into play, and that those are our primary strengths. Foster that, have tolerance for it. Even if someone's opinion may drastically differ from yours, recognize and have patience and perseverance that if you tolerate that for some time, we will get to the best position. Do not tolerate people who are being disruptive. Do not allow someone to steal the floor and not allow one of the opinions. You must practice patience, perseverance, and tolerance. Right. So that is the material that I prepared for today. Sort of looking back on what we've covered here, the first idea is what are the facilitator roles within HL7? They include modeling, publication, vocabulary. I think conformance is standing up. I think security may eventually stand up a facilitator, but there are certain skills that are necessary in order to develop a work product that we have incorporated the term facilitator as a knowledge worker in that particular skill, who then facilitates work on that aspect of a project and the project that they're assigned to. I did compare the concept of the facilitator in a work group, and that both the facilitator and the co-chair are responsible for encouraging participation and leading to consensus. You're equally responsible for that. Co-chair has greater accountability in the way that one becomes a co-chair. Those are different than the facilitator roles that we have on projects, but the idea of presiding over the group in their decision-making process is common among the two roles. I hopefully have conveyed the dynamics of group decision-making, the idea of a new topic coming up with divergence, and then leading into convergence to eventually come to consensus. I talk about facilitating listening skills, where you are helping persons who may be having difficulty articulating, where you will also want to overcome a person who is simply being argumentative, all of those things that get in the way of cooperation. You're listening for those and addressing them as they surface. And that's an important point. Address them as soon as, it's like whack-a-mole. You have to get them as soon as if you let them linger, others will begin to participate in the same manner and it will spread like a disease. So you want to make it look for those disruptive behaviors and address them immediately. Dealing with difficult dynamics, again, ways that you can do that is by restating what a person's saying in other words, calling people out in order to get perspectives, etc. Those are ways that you can deal with those dynamics that would be destructive. And then you want to make sure that you understand the principles of sustained agreements by making sure that by the end of the meeting, everyone in the group realizes that this is the opinion of the group. Whether or not it was the opinion you had going into the discussion or not is not important. The idea is that you agree at the end that this is the best decision going forward. And so you want to make sure that that has happened, especially if someone has been silent during the meeting. Then you want to make sure that they have bought into the decision that's made, or else 3 meetings later, you'll find them raising the same topic again to be revisited. Okay, that's all I have to present. I think we still have 30 minutes or so left as the allotted time. I'd like to open it up to the floor and have some discussion. And it's my understanding that some members of this audience are existing co-chairs, and some of you are new to the co-chair position. And I'd sort of like to hear the difference in how you received the information that was conveyed today. So someone who is an experienced co-chair, did you find this at all useful? Were you able to identify with any of the topics that were brought up?
So I don't know that I would not call myself an experienced co-chair. I've just started. I'm a new co-chair this quarter, or this year, but I did want to just shout out, we're in the Health and Human Services work group, and one of the other experienced co-chairs in our group is Mohammed, and he does a phenomenal job at going through the facilitator role that you outlined. That he does an exemplary job, because our discussions do get heated sometimes.
Yeah.
He's excellent at keeping everybody on task, settling the fire down to a nice, nice level where everybody's able to still talk. He's really is a great example of everything that you went over. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, like if anybody's looking to see how it's done and done well, Mohammed does a really great job on our calls, because they do get heated.
We do have some very great, excellent facilitators in HL7. It's the reason why I've been with HL7 all these years. I've had many different employers, but I keep going back to HL7. That's my family, and that's where I get my work done, because of the great facilitators. And hopefully you've recognized some of these techniques that the gentleman you're talking about demonstrates, and that they are effective.
Craig, go ahead.
Craig,
sorry, Michelle, did you have something else to say there? I think I heard my name called, but.
Yeah, no, I was just saying absolutely. Mohammed Jafar does a great job.
And there you go. You hear Craig also does an excellent job. And you see what he did just then? Before taking the floor, he made sure that Michelle had finished her point before he talked. And that's a sign of a great facilitator. Go ahead, Craig.
All right.
What was
I'll admit I only caught the second half. I joined late for something else, but I think something caught my eye that resonated, and then I have a question for you. I think the one that really got me was, I think on one slide you had avoid over-reliance on authority or something similar to that. Overcome reliance on authority. I think this is an important one. I know this one stuck out to me because I know I'm guilty of this one of, somebody asks a question, and when you've got a particularly quiet group and you know the answer, it's sometimes easy to be authoritative and maybe a little too authoritative. So I think this is a good one in making sure that even if it's a quiet group and you know the answer, there's still some discussion, right? You at least take the opportunity to say, or at least that's, my take on it. What did people think? And so I think that's one that I resonated with.
right?
And
Are you saying that you put yourself in the position of authority sometimes when you wish you hadn't?
yeah, I think so. I think
Not that you're yielding to someone with authority, it's that you're
no,
asserting.
I think I am personally sometimes probably more authoritative than is helpful for the group, right? Not necessarily that I'm forcing my decision on anything, but just it's easier sometimes to say this is the way it is. If no one else is speaking, it's sometimes easier just to say this is the way it is, and that isn't always helpful for the group. And so just something to keep an eye on, I think.
It is probably useful in the instance where the issue being discussed is a process issue, not a content issue.
Right.
So that you say, well, no, we cannot go from STU to normative without balloting. That's a rule. So you can be authoritative on that, but you cannot not say we don't want to go to normative because we're not ready yet.
Yeah, it's sometimes just easy to slip into those authoritative rules if you're so used to doing it for process things than for non-process. I know I struggle with it sometimes. And then I was curious, you also said, when things are getting sort of heated, you can sometimes say, okay, well, we're going to discuss this for another 5 minutes, and then we're going to take a vote on it, or we're going to at least table it and move on. I'm curious how you balance the need for consensus-driven, everyone gets a chance to talk, with the fact that conversations just can't go on forever because no decision then gets made, or you're just going to end up hitting the end of the hour and deferring. So is there any HL7 guidance on when it's okay to cut off conversation?
I don't believe there's any HL7 guidance on that. Guidance was a good choice of word because it really is a judgment call. Some of it is some of our activities do have an amount of urgency associated with them. And by urgency, I mean, if we don't make this decision today, we're going to miss this ballot cycle. It makes it urgent where this today is the day that the decision needs to be made. But you really do need to listen to the dynamics that are going on in the discussion, and use all of your skills in an attempt to bring those disruptive features to a close and lead towards consensus. If in your judgment that's not going to happen in the time allotted, we have one meeting for this meeting. I know we only have 30 minutes left of this discussion. So with that in mind, you can introduce a new process that would allow the decision to move on. So it's really a judgment call based on your read as to whether or not further discussion, allowing more time of the time allotted, will actually lead to consensus, or whether this is really something that needs to go some other way.
All right, thank you. That's helpful.
So Sadhna, it sounds like we have 15 participants online, and then most of them are silent.
Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I'm silent because you're such a good teacher. So thank you. But my question is, given the art of facilitation, I feel like as a co-chair, I also get an overwhelming amount of the action items that come out of the meeting. So is there any way like to help engage people to, again, that shared ownership is very difficult to solicit. And I struggle with it. So any suggestions on how to get people to engage better?
Well,
Done without it, right?
yeah, I understand. The coming out of the meeting with lots of action items, it will lead to co-chair burnout.
Correct.
The co-chairs have a sufficient amount of responsibilities, some of which only they can do. Uploading the ballot reconciliation package, attending a particular, those are co-chair responsibilities that cannot be delegated. Other than process, you should not be walking out with action items. Those should be delegated to someone in that project team. That project should have a facilitator, a project facilitator, who would be the more likely candidate to get action items than you as co-chair.
Yeah. I think just as managing the number of resources we have in our working group, some of that is under a big project umbrella to take on requirements from everyone and then disposition them and get updates done. And so I don't feel like that is always the case, that we can put that on a project facilitator, because it then becomes the co-chairs that are facilitating the updates for fire, right?
Can you, I'm sorry, could you give me an example of some action item you've taken on that?
Like, let's say we're having a conversation about a JIRA ticket that actually is more than just that JIRA ticket. And I'll give you an example like today, right? We have a technical training for a technical correction for, oh, your extensions are unwieldy, you need to clean them up. Okay, great. I think that's more than a technical correction, but we can't do all of that work in an hour time span and progress in our JIRA backlog. And so that is not assigned to any one particular project, right? Because the proliferation of extensions or profiles within our resources need to be managed across, right? The working group.
Right.
So that's, that's an action item we take. And then it's like, okay, well, where do we have this conversation? And does it go in Zula? Does it go in a meeting? Does it go to the working group? And then who's going to initiate all of that communication? It falls on the co-chairs. Does that help?
That does help. And it sounds like a revisit of the step out of the content to talk about process, where you've now are not trying to make your extensions unwieldy. You're trying to come up with a process by which this topic will be discussed, hopefully coming up with the extensions not being perceived as unwieldy. That, by the way, is a very vague description that whoever wrote that would need to come explain what they mean by unwieldy, and being more specific. But yes, your task then becomes to either set up a separate conference call group. That is your responsibility as a work group. The one way to delegate that is to reach out for a leader on that. Oftentimes, if you ask someone, they'll say yes. It's more difficult to ask for a volunteer,
Sure.
but if I say, Jill, would you look into that? We need to take this offline. Would you mind putting together a group and I'll help you out that, but in any way I can. But we need to move on to another topic.
So what you're saying is I need to get better at pointing to somebody who is.
Well, yeah, certainly ask for volunteers.
I do that, but it's like crickets. Silence.
Yeah, and then when you ask someone outright, that will make them uncomfortable. They'll recognize that there will be some discomfort introduced by doing that, especially if that individual responds with no, and now you start hunting throughout the group. Everybody feels like they're the next target.
That's right. Which I don't like doing, right? I don't like calling people out. So then therefore I take on the responsibility, but I just think there should be a better way for me to handle it. That's all.
Right. But yeah, I see the issue you're bringing forth. It really is a process issue, and which is the responsibility of the co-chair. But I think there was a recent work done. I know that John was involved in the whole idea of co-chair burnout.
Yeah.
A lot of recommendations came out of there about how to avoid burnout. But it isn't. I mean, the job is enormous. I mean, I think of Barack Obama when he came in with black hair and left with gray. I got this gray hair from being co-chair. I mean, it is a hard job. I don't want to scare off any of your new ones, but yeah, it is difficult.
I mean, I just think that there's certain work groups that have a lot of resources and a lot of demands. And then there's other working groups that don't have as many resources. And so the comparison between that is also leading to that burnout, because I've been in conversations where, people are being given gratitude and praise for getting their JIRA backlog done, but they only have like a small set of resources to deal with. And then those of us that have like too many to count, we're just doing the best we can with the limited, people that are attending the meetings. And you can't get through. I mean, if some days we can get through 8, sometimes we got through 2 and no decisions today. So
Right. Yeah.
So thank you.
Marty.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know who at HL7 needs to hear it, but I think fire is the root of a lot of these. And Marty, I think that's what you were saying, right? Is that in terms of being able to delegate to project teams when you've got a PSS and stuff, that's straightforward. There are just some things that, co-chairs have to do process-wise, but
right.
Yeah, I agree. Dealing with fire in general, right? Base fire is the single biggest resource. And I just don't know if this is going to continue, right? Is there a source of resources to, even if there's HL7 resources to help catalog what the JIRA tickets are, and maybe do, some of that outreach to say, all right, AMS, you really know referrals. So on the referral resource, which I don't think is a referral, right? On the service request resource for referrals, right? Does this JIRA make sense? And identifying those subject matter experts or something, if there were any resources from HL7 just to help the co-chairs do that, because Marty's right? Either you end up trying to do it en masse on a call and don't get very far, or someone has to go out of their way to, at least lead a small group, and neither one works well unless you have a very enlightened employer that, dedicates some of your time towards this stuff. So
Right.
I don't know.
And Craig,
I sympathize, Marty.
yeah, we've used dashboards and the tools within JIRA to try to keep on track. But when you have over 300 tickets and a lot of them are aged and new ones coming in for ballots, you have to prioritize. And so we've had some scrutiny of why did you do these before those? Or mine didn't get in there. Well, they weren't part of a ballot comment. So like, it is very difficult to manage all of the expectations, and we alone can only disposition and triage the tickets to make sure they get to the right place and the right people. So I think that there's the tooling there and we use it to the maximum, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, no JIRA tool can help you triage or propose dispositions.
Exactly. And so I just want to make sure that we're utilizing all of our resources as far as volunteers go to be more efficient. And I'm just wondering if that's the question was, how do we get people to engage and do more work with us as opposed to just participate in the group discussions? Because sure, we can facilitate the discussions, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of work on the back end that's generated by fire.
Right. Yeah, and we don't have the time in this course to address this issue, but I do want to recognize what has happened in this conversation. So a topic was introduced, the idea of how does a committee handle the enormous workload without burning out their co-chair? And we've had some discussion first describing the problem. And Marty, I've heard her taking the position that the size of the work is not evenly distributed among all work groups. I heard Greg taking the position of fire being particularly difficult among our products that make these things happen. So these were different perspectives, not divergent in that they were not the same perspective or comment. But we've introduced the topic. We've gotten some familiar responses. My response was familiar or delegated, and now we would get into further discussion about where do we go from here. And I referenced the work on the co-chair burnout, and it really is something that probably needs to be spoken about collaboratively along the co-chairs to come to consensus as to how we make sure that HL7 is still successful without burning out its people, and things like Craig identified some potential changes we can make. Maybe we hire staff to do some of the heavy lifting, or maybe we elongate the time span for getting things done. But this will be the point where we begin looking at solutions to the topics that have been raised. Yeah. Thank you for that, Marty.
Thanks.
Julie?
This is kind of on the same topic, but I think that would definitely be very helpful if we could, Don, and I don't know if that's something you can help with, but if we could try to follow up on this question. I'm noting specifically that ability to delegate, I think, starts to vanish from our capabilities, even more so as we get closer to final publication. And I don't know if it's somewhat of a, wow, this is getting close to actually becoming something that I might have to do. And there's now some concern. I certainly feel that myself, even as a co-chair, getting close to finalizing publication. So maybe that timing is also something to specifically note to HL7 as a particular pain point.
Good. So I don't know if anyone noticed what I did there. I didn't respond. Not that I didn't agree with it. I do. I just wanted to use it as an example that in this particular setting, we're talking about facilitated training and such, and the skills necessary. And what we've heard here in this conversation is we do have a problem with management. It's not appropriate for this particular call. But the idea that those topics are coming in, I think the idea that that discussion does need to be elevated. I think the proper audience for that is in the co-chair meetings, or what used to be called co-chair meetings that are now TSC report outs or something, is the place for that discussion, not this particular meeting. But but I agree with and resonate with all the points that have been made. Did I just shut down conversation?
No, Amadi has just responded to that. I was hoping to facilitate within quotes my way out of it.
Yeah. I don't want to force you to stay and ask questions. I mean, you can have 10 minutes back on your agenda if you want to close it out now.
Any other questions? Any discussions? Julie, you unmuted your microphone. Any questions?
I have one more. I'm wondering if something that might be in scope, sorry to be out of scope with the other one, is for today, is I didn't see on your list something that can be less than helpful is when you have a participant who really needs to do more research on a particular topic. And I'm wondering if you have suggestions about how to manage that.
You have a participant who needs to do it, so they're not knowledgeable.
Right there, and sometimes you may receive questions that indicate that the asker maybe needs some more background on a particular area. In the implementation guide I'm working on specifically, we're calling on a lot of different knowledge topics, some of them identity verification, some of them patient matching. It's good to hear I'm not expected to be an expert on all of those things, but it leads to difficult conversations when we have questions, particularly repeated questions from some of our work group participants who are asking questions, from my opinion, that seem to reflect a lack of understanding of some foundational things that might help them understand the work group and my own responses better.
Sure. This is a topic that can't be handled with a single sentence explanation. It's a
right,
it's
right, and some becomes delicate.
Sure. One thought that comes to mind is Sadhana is always looking for educational topics. And you might want to suggest that, well, gee, maybe HL7 should have a tutorial on patient matching and identity management. Maybe make it a free tutorial for 1 quarter or something. And then you can refer people to those classes. For those things that seem to be recurring topics, like identity management is always going to be, vocabulary management is always a topic. Those kinds of things, if they're not already on the tutorial agenda, suggest to Sadhana that that topic be added. You might even volunteer to teach it. And then also, it'd be good if those, you can then refer the person to that class. Other than that, you can ask that, acknowledge to that person that's probably something that needs to be taken offline, and maybe suggest someplace where they could go to get that information.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and I appreciate how that could be scalable to the readers going beyond our work group participants too after our implementation guide is published. So appreciate it.
Right. Sadhana, you agree? You are open to new topics, correct?
Yes, that is correct. In fact, we would like to have more of. I mean, they could be shorter videos also, if it is possible.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah. I even have just a YouTube that you can send them to.
Yeah.
15 minutes. Yeah. And but you as a co-chair would then, if you hear that going on in the group, that someone is trying to participate in the discussion, but you can tell by their contribution that they're lacking a certain baseline of knowledge that may be higher within the group than in that individual, you might want to suggest that without being, that's where it becomes delicate. How do you not embarrass them? But just to point out, perhaps without identifying the individual in particular, this is a very complex topic. In fact, that the tutorial on it is like 15 minutes long. Some of you might want to take so without that sort of thing, it would be difficult to point to that person that you need to get trained. All of us are learning, and hopefully we all learn something every day. One thing I did when you get the slide deck, you'll see this bonus slide. This is something I picked up, I think, on LinkedIn or something. The 10 Commandments of Logic. These are things that one should not do while trying to come to agreement. Do not attack another person's character, but the argument. Do not represent or exaggerate a person's argument. Do not use small numbers to repeat the whole. So these are commandments of if you're really going to have a discussion and come to agreement based on logic and the facts, you want to obey these 10 commandments. And that's it. That's me. I'm Abdul Malik Shakir. I'm still with High 3 Solutions. Although I think you will soon see announced on LinkedIn, Shakir Consulting version 3.0. My first decade in Shakir Consulting was dedicated to using the standard to help applications interoperate. I then changed to High 3 Solution when I looked at the infrastructure. And now I'm just looking at knowledge transfer. I'm not doing anything but traveling. But any way that I can do knowledge transfer to those who are coming behind me, I'd be happy to do it. I think we can draw it to a close now, unless there's someone who was unheard, who wants to be heard before we leave.
Anyone else? Okay. Thanks a lot, Abdul Malik, for that excellent presentation. Thanks, everyone, for that wonderful discussion. We hope to see you in future trainings. Till we meet again. Bye, everyone. This is Sadhana Alangar, 807's Director of Education, signing off.
Thank you.